She saved an American pilot. They tortured her until a black medic broke every rule. A Pacific island, August 1945. The war is ending, but mercy has no place here. A Japanese woman lies broken in the dirt, her legs shattered, her hands crushed. Weeks of deliberate cruelty, all because she chose to save one of ours. A black sergeant stands over her. He's been told to walk away, let her die in transport, erase the evidence. But he sees what command cannot. A pilot who lived because she refused to betray him. Torture that punished her for choosing humanity. So he forges a signature, falsifies orders, risks everything to stop them from finishing what they started. The captain knows. The arrest is coming. And when they put him in handcuffs, one question tears through the camp. How far will one soldier go to save the enemy who proved more American than the army itself? And when the truth comes out, will it matter at all? The heat was unbearable. Sweat ran down Sergeant Elijah Carter's face and soaked through his uniform. He stood in the center of the POW processing camp on a Pacific island controlled by the United States. The sun blazed overhead. Flies buzzed around open wounds and food scraps scattered in the dirt. Around him, his black medical unit worked quickly. They cleaned wounds on American soldiers stretched out on wooden pallets. The men groaned in pain. Some called out for water, others lay silent with fever-bright eyes staring at nothing. White military police walked between the tents. They shouted orders. Some of them spat racist slurs at Elijah's men. Elijah kept his jaw tight. He had learned not to respond. A loudspeaker crackled to life near the command tent. Propaganda music blared across the camp. A voice announced news about Allied victories. The music was too loud and cheerful for this place of blood and exhaustion. Corporal Isaiah Brooks worked beside Elijah. Everyone called him Izzy. He pressed gauze against a soldier's leg wound. The white soldier flinched but did not thank him. Then the gates opened. A column of people entered the camp. Japanese women prisoners shuffled forward in torn clothing. Their faces were blank with exhaustion. MPs barked at them to move faster. Elijah glanced up briefly. He returned his attention to the wounded American in front of him. But something made him look again. The women carried someone between them. A young Japanese woman hung limp in their arms. Her legs were wrapped in blood-soaked rags. The fabric had turned dark red and brown. The MPs stopped the column in the center of the camp. One of them gestured roughly. He pointed at the woman they carried. "Put her down," the MP commanded. "She can't walk. Leave her." The women holding her did not move. One of them spoke rapidly in Japanese. Her voice shook. The MP stepped closer. "I said put her down." They lowered the unconscious woman to the ground. Dust rose around her body. The women tried to stay near her. The MPs pushed them back. One woman screamed. She fought against the hands holding her. Elijah froze. He stared at the woman lying in the dirt. Her face was pale. Her breathing was shallow. Those legs were not combat injuries. Someone had done this to her deliberately. The woman who had screamed broke free for a moment. She knelt beside the unconscious woman and touched her face. An MP grabbed her shoulder. Elijah felt something shift inside his chest. He took one step forward, then another. An MP moved into his path and blocked him completely. Elijah stood inches from the military policeman's chest. The MP was taller. His hand rested on his belt near his baton. Behind him, the Japanese woman lay motionless in the dirt. "Step back, Sergeant," the MP said. His voice was cold. Elijah did not move. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Soldiers and prisoners formed a circle around them. The propaganda music continued to play from the loudspeaker. Izzy appeared at Elijah's shoulder. He spoke quietly. "Eli, don't." But Elijah was already moving. He stepped around the MP and dropped to one knee beside the woman. Her pulse was weak. Her skin felt clammy. The wrappings around her legs were crude and filthy. The MP grabbed Elijah's arm. "I gave you an order." Elijah shook him off. He began checking the woman's vital signs with quick, practiced movements. His hands were steady, even though fury burned in his chest. Boots struck the ground in rapid rhythm. Captain Hargrove pushed through the crowd. His face was red with anger. He stopped and stared down at Elijah. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Hargrove's voice cut through the heat. Elijah looked up. "She needs immediate medical attention, sir. She'll die without it. She's a Jap prisoner, not your concern." "I'm a medic, sir. This is exactly my concern." The two men stared at each other. Sweat dripped from Hargrove's chin. Flies buzzed in the silence. The Japanese woman who had screamed earlier watched with desperate eyes. Hargrove's jaw worked. He glanced at the gathered soldiers. Too many witnesses. He waved his hand sharply. "Fine. Minimal care. Stabilize her. Then she goes to the POW medical section." "There is no POW medical section," Elijah said. "Then make do with what you have. That's an order." Elijah nodded once. He gestured to Izzy and two other medics. They lifted the unconscious woman carefully. Her head rolled to the side. The other Japanese woman tried to follow. An MP blocked her path. "Only medical personnel," the MP said. The woman spoke in rapid Japanese. She pointed at the unconscious woman. Tears ran down her face. Elijah made a decision. "She comes too. We need a translator." Hargrove opened his mouth to object. Then he shrugged. "Whatever. Just get them out of my sight." They carried the woman toward the segregated medical tent reserved for black soldiers. It stood apart from the main medical facility. The canvas was patched and stained. The equipment inside was older and less complete. The Japanese woman followed close behind. MPs muttered to each other as they watched. One of them spat in the dirt. As they reached the tent entrance, the woman stumbled. She caught herself on the tent pole. Her hands shook. Izzy held the flap open. Inside, the air was hot and still. Elijah prepared the examination table. The other medics brought supplies. Outside, an MP's voice carried clearly. "They're going to regret this." The inside of the medical tent smelled of iodine and old canvas. Afternoon light filtered through the fabric walls. It cast everything in a yellow-brown glow. Elijah laid the unconscious woman on the examination table. The Japanese woman who had followed them stood near the entrance. "What's your name?" Elijah asked her. She hesitated. Her eyes moved from him to the woman on the table. "Aiko." "And her?" "Hana." Elijah nodded. He turned to Izzy. "Get me clean water, sutures, morphine if we have any left." Izzy moved quickly. The other medics brought supplies from the limited stock they kept. Elijah carefully unwrapped the blood-soaked rags from Hana's legs. What he saw made his hands pause. Both legs had been broken deliberately. Multiple fractures. Old injuries that had started to heal wrong. New damage layered on top. Burns. Deep bruising that formed patterns. This was not combat. This was torture. Aiko made a small sound behind him. She covered her mouth. Elijah's jaw tightened. He had seen terrible things in this war, but this was different. Someone had hurt this woman slowly, methodically. "How long ago?" he asked. Aiko did not understand. He pointed at the legs. "How long?" "Weeks," Aiko whispered. "Many weeks." Elijah began cleaning the wounds with gentle hands. Hana remained unconscious. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Izzy handed him instruments without being asked. They had worked together long enough to move in rhythm. The tent flap opened. A black medic named Thomas entered with a bowl of clean water. He stopped when he saw Hana's legs. His face went hard. Lord have mercy, Thomas said quietly. We need to stabilize the fractures, Elijah said. Find me splinting material, anything rigid. Thomas left quickly. Outside, voices carried on the wind, white soldiers talking, some of them laughing. The contrast made Elijah's stomach turn. He worked steadily for the next hour, setting bones that had healed crooked, cleaning infections, stitching torn skin. His supplies were limited. He had to choose carefully what to use. Aiko stayed in the corner. She watched everything with wide eyes. Sometimes she whispered in Japanese. Elijah thought she might be praying. As he worked, he noticed Hana's hands. The fingers were bent at odd angles, more broken bones. Someone had crushed them deliberately. Why? The word came out before he could stop it. Aiko looked up. Her face was pale. She help American. They punish her. Elijah's hands stopped moving. He stared at Aiko. What American? Before she could answer, Hana's eyes opened. They were dark and unfocused. She looked at Elijah without seeing him. Her lips moved. The word came out in broken English, barely a whisper. Help. Then her eyes closed again. Her head fell to the side. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. A storm was coming. Rain hammered the canvas tent. The sound was deafening. Water leaked through patches in the ceiling and formed puddles on the dirt floor. Elijah worked under the light of 2 kerosene lanterns. Their flames flickered with each gust of wind. The generator powdered the camp sputtered. The lights dimmed. For a moment, everything went dark. Then the power returned with a mechanical cough. Elijah had Hana's right leg exposed. The damage was worse than he had thought. The bones had been broken in multiple places. They had healed incorrectly. Scar tissue had formed around the fractures. To fix it properly, he would need surgical tools they did not have. He did what he could. He realigned the worst of the breaks. He cleaned out infection. He wrapped everything in clean bandages and splinted both legs as straight as possible. But he knew the truth. She would never walk again. Not properly. The damage was too severe. Too old. Izzy stood across from him. He held the lantern steady while Elijah worked. Sweat ran down both their faces. The tent was hot despite the rain. From outside came the distant sound of gunfire. The training range was still active, even in the storm. Soldiers practicing. The shots echoed across the camp. Aiko sat on an overturned crate in the corner. She had not spoken in over an hour. Her eyes stayed fixed on Hana's face. Elijah finished the last bandage. He stepped back and wiped his hands on a rag. The rag came away stained with blood and iodine. He stared at it for a moment. Will she live? Aiko's voice was barely audible over the rain. Elijah looked at Hana. Her breathing had improved. Her color was slightly better, but her legs were ruined. Yes, he said. She'll live. Aiko closed her eyes. Relief washed over her face. But she won't walk, Elijah added. He did not believe in lying. The damage is too severe. Aiko nodded slowly. She had probably known already. Thunder cracked directly overhead. The tent shuddered. One of the lanterns swung on its hook. Shadows danced across the canvas walls. Elijah sank onto a wooden stool. His entire body ached. He had been on his feet for hours. The muscles in his back screamed for rest. Izzy set the lantern down carefully. You did good, Eli. Elijah did not respond. He stared at his hands. They were steady now, but he could still feel the broken bones beneath Hana's skin, the deliberate cruelty of what had been done to her. Outside, a voice called through the rain. Curfew in 10 minutes. All personnel to assigned quarters. The announcement repeated 3 times. Then silence, except for the rain. Izzy looked at Aiko. She can't stay here tonight. They'll come looking. Elijah knew he was right, but he also knew what would happen if Aiko left. Hana would wake alone, confused, terrified. He made another decision. She stays, Elijah said quietly. Just for tonight. Izzy's eyes widened. They'll have your stripes for that. Then they'll have them. The rain had stopped. Night settled over the camp like a heavy blanket. Elijah stood near the tent entrance and looked out at the compound. Searchlights swept across the muddy ground. Guards walked their routes between the rows of tents. Behind him, Hana slept. Her breathing was slow and steady. The morphine they had given her would last a few more hours. Aiko sat beside the cot. She had not moved since Elijah told her she could stay. Izzy paced near the supply crates. He kept glancing toward the entrance. They're going to do a tent check. They always do after curfew. I know, Elijah said. And when they find her here, we'll deal with it. Izzy stopped pacing. He looked at Elijah with a mixture of respect and concern. This ain't like you, Eli. You always play it smart. Keep your head down. Elijah turned to face his friend. Maybe I'm tired of keeping my head down. Footsteps approached outside, boots splashing through puddles. Elijah held up his hand for silence. He moved to the tent flap and peered through a gap. 2 MPs walked past. They were talking in low voices. One of them carried a clipboard. They stopped at the next tent over and went inside. Elijah could hear them speaking to the medics stationed there. He turned back to Aiko. You need to hide. Now. She understood immediately. She moved behind the stack of medical crates in the corner. The space was narrow. She pressed herself against the canvas wall and became very still. The MPs finished with the other tent. Their footsteps grew louder. They were coming here. Elijah positioned himself near the examination table. Izzy picked up a medical chart and pretended to read it. Neither of them looked at the corner where Aiko hid. The tent flap opened. An MP stepped inside. He was young with a hard face. His partner waited outside. Evening check, the MP said. He looked around the tent. His eyes moved from Elijah to Izzy to Hana lying on the cot. Who's that? Japanese prisoner, Elijah said. Critical condition. Captain Hargrove authorized treatment. The MP walked closer to Hana. He stared down at her bandaged legs. She gonna make it? Maybe. The MP grunted. He turned slowly and scanned the rest of the tent. His eyes passed over the supply crates. Elijah forced himself to breathe normally. Where's her translator? The MP asked. Heard there was a Jap woman came in with her. Sent back to the POW section hours ago, Elijah said. The lie came smoothly. The MP looked at him for a long moment. Elijah met his gaze without blinking. Finally, the MP nodded. All right, keep this tent secure. No unauthorized personnel. Yes, sir. The MP left. His partner asked him something outside. Their voices faded as they moved to the next tent. Elijah waited 2 full minutes before signaling to Aiko. She emerged from behind the crates. Her face was pale. Thank you, she whispered. Elijah nodded. He looked at Hana again. In sleep, her face looked younger, peaceful. He wondered what she had looked like before the torture. Outside, somewhere in the darkness, someone laughed. The sound carried on the wind and then disappeared. The lanterns had burned low. It was well past midnight. Elijah sat on a stool near Hana's cot. His head drooped forward. He was not quite asleep, but not fully awake either. The tent flap opened without warning. Captain Hargrove stepped inside. He was flanked by 2 MPs. All 3 men looked wide awake and angry. Elijah shot to his feet. Izzy, who had been dozing against the far wall, straightened quickly. Hargrove's eyes swept the tent. They landed on Hana, then on Aiko, who had frozen beside the medical supplies. "I gave explicit orders," Hargrove said slowly. "The translator was to be returned to the POW section." "She's providing medical assistance, sir," Elijah said. "The patient needs—" "I don't care what the patient needs." Hargrove stepped closer. "You violated a direct order, Sergeant. That's grounds for court-martial." Silence filled the tent. Outside, the night sounds of the camp continued. Distant voices, the hum of generators, a dog barking. Hargrove pointed at Aiko. "Get her out of here now!" One of the MPs moved toward Aiko. She backed away. Her eyes went to Hana. "Wait," Elijah said. The word came out harder than he intended. Hargrove's face darkened. "Excuse me? If you remove the translator, I can't communicate with the patient when she wakes. I can't assess her pain levels. I can't get consent for procedures." "You don't need consent from a prisoner." "I need it from a patient," Elijah said quietly. "That's military medical protocol, sir." Hargrove stared at him. The two men locked eyes. Elijah could see the calculations happening behind Hargrove's expression. The captain wanted to punish him, but he also did not want the hassle of explaining a dead prisoner to his superiors. "Fine," Hargrove said finally. "The translator stays during waking hours only. At night she returns to POW quarters. No exceptions." "Yes, sir." "And Sergeant?" Hargrove leaned in close. "You're walking a very thin line. One more step out of bounds and I'll have you digging latrines until you ship home. Understood?" "Understood, sir." Hargrove turned on his heel and left. The MPs followed him. Their boots struck the ground in unison as they walked away. Izzy let out a long breath. That was close. Elijah sat back down. His hands were shaking slightly. He clasped them together to make them stop. Aiko moved closer to Hana's cot. She looked down at the sleeping woman. When she looked up again, her eyes were wet. "You risk much," she said to Elijah. He did not answer. He was not sure why he was risking so much. This was not his fight. Hana was not his responsibility. But something about seeing her lying in the dirt had broken something inside him. He noticed Hana's right hand resting on top of the thin blanket. Her fingers were curled around something. He leaned closer. It was a scrap of cloth, small and dirty, folded many times. Carefully, he reached out and touched Hana's hand. She did not wake. He gently opened her fingers and took the cloth. He unfolded it beneath the lamplight. His breath caught. Stitched onto the fabric in rough thread was a drawing. Simple but clear. A black man in a pilot's uniform. Morning came with the sound of a bugle. The harsh notes cut through the dawn air. Men groaned and stumbled out of their tents. The camp came to life in stages. Generators coughed to full power. Cook fires were lit. The smell of coffee and burnt oatmeal drifted across the compound. Elijah stood outside the medical tent. He had not slept. The cloth scrap was folded in his breast pocket. He could feel it there against his chest. Every time he breathed, he was aware of its presence. Soldiers formed lines at the mess tent. Ration distribution had begun. Men held tin cups and metal plates. They shuffled forward slowly. Some of them talked. Others stood silent and half asleep. The Japanese POW section was separate. Elijah could see the women there receiving their smaller rations. They sat on the ground. Guards watched them from a distance. Aiko had left before dawn, as ordered. She was there now among the other women. Elijah could not see her clearly from where he stood. Izzy emerged from the tent behind him. He stretched and yawned. "Any change?" "No. Still sleeping." "That's good. She needs rest." Elijah nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about the drawing stitched into the cloth. The details were crude but specific. The pilot's uniform. the wings on his chest. The color of his skin shone through careful choice of dark thread. "I need to talk to Aiko," Elijah said. Izzy looked at him. "About what?" "About this." Elijah pulled the cloth from his pocket and showed it to Izzy. Izzy studied it. His eyes widened. "Where'd you find that?" "Hana was holding it." "What does it mean?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." A whistle blew across the camp. Work details were being assigned. Men moved toward their designated areas. Some headed to the motor pool, others to construction projects. The black soldiers always got the hardest labor assignments. Elijah waited until the morning rush settled. Then he walked toward the POW section. A guard stopped him at the perimeter. "No unauthorized contact," the guard said. "I'm her medic. I need to check on translator availability." The guard hesitated. Then he shrugged. "Make it quick." Elijah entered the POW area. The women watched him approach. Their faces showed no emotion. Some of them looked away. Aiko saw him coming. She stood slowly. They met near a water barrel. Elijah kept his voice low. "The cloth Hana was holding, the drawing on it." Aiko's face changed. Fear flickered in her eyes. "You see?" "I see. What is it?" She looked around to make sure no guards were listening. Then she spoke quietly in broken English. "Hana help American pilot, black pilot. He crashed near village." Elijah felt his heart beat faster. "When?" 6 months before, maybe more." "What happened to him?" Aiko shook her head. "Japanese military find out. Take Hana, hurt her, ask questions. She not tell them where he go." The pieces began to fit together in Elijah's mind. The torture, the broken bones, the deliberate cruelty. Hana had protected an American. She had paid for it with her body. He stared at Aiko. His throat felt tight. "She did this for one of us?" Aiko nodded. Her eyes were steady. "She say he was person, not enemy. Just person who need help." A guard called out. "Time's up. Move along." Elijah stepped back. He looked at Aiko one more time. She lowered her head in a gesture that might have been a bow. He walked back to the medical tent. The sun was climbing higher. Heat began to build. He pulled out the cloth scrap again and looked at the stitched figure. A black pilot, rescued by a Japanese woman, and she had been destroyed for it. The afternoon was brutal. Heat shimmered off the metal roofs of the camp buildings. Elijah worked through his regular duties. He treated minor injuries. He distributed medicine. He filled out paperwork with a dull pencil. But his mind was not on any of it. He kept returning to what Aiko had told him. The story seemed impossible. Why would a Japanese woman risk everything to save an enemy soldier? Why would she endure weeks of torture rather than give him up? Izzy noticed his distraction. "You're thinking about that pilot. Can't stop thinking about it." "You believe her? Could be a story. Something they made up." Elijah shook his head. "Nobody makes up that kind of damage. I saw what they did to her. That was real." An airplane flew overhead. The engine roar made conversation impossible for a few seconds. Elijah watched it pass. He wondered if the pilot up there knew what it meant to be saved. To owe your life to someone you were supposed to hate. The camp radio crackled to life near the command tent. An announcement came through. Something about surrender negotiations. The words were unclear, but the tone was significant. Soldiers stopped what they were doing to listen. "Think the war's really ending?" Izzy asked. "Maybe? What happens to prisoners when it ends?" Elijah had been wondering the same thing. He did not have an answer. He returned to the medical tent as the sun began to sink. Hana was awake. She stared at the ceiling with unfocused eyes. When she heard him enter, she turned her head slowly. "Aiko?" she whispered. She's safe, in the POW section. Hannah seemed to understand. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, she looked directly at Elijah. Her gaze was clear despite the pain he knew she must be feeling. He moved closer to the cot. He pulled the cloth scrap from his pocket and held it up where she could see it. Her eyes widened. She tried to reach for it. Her broken fingers would not obey. "The pilot," Elijah said quietly. "Aiko told me." Hannah's breathing quickened. She searched his face. He saw fear there. She expected him to be angry, to punish her for helping the enemy. Instead, he folded the cloth carefully and placed it on the blanket beside her good hand. "You saved one of us," he said. His voice was rough. "You saved one of my brothers." Tears formed in Hannah's eyes. She tried to speak, but no words came. Elijah pulled the stool closer and sat down. He had never been good with words. He was better with his hands, with fixing broken things. But he tried anyway. "They did this to you because you showed him mercy, because you saw him as human." Hannah nodded slightly. A tear ran down her cheek. "I don't know who that pilot was," Elijah continued. "I don't know if he made it home, but I know what you did for him, and I know what it cost you." He reached out and gently touched her shoulder. The gesture was brief, professional. But something passed between them in that moment. An understanding that went beyond language or nationality or war. Hannah's lips moved. She formed words in broken English. "One good thing." Elijah felt something crack open in his chest. He thought about all the men he had treated, all the wounds he had cleaned, all the soldiers he had sent back to fight. He had saved lives to send them back to death. But Hannah had saved a life just to save it. Nothing more. No orders. No duty. Just simple human mercy. He sat with her as the light faded outside. He did not speak again. Neither did she. The cloth scrap lay between them. A silent testimony to courage that would never be recorded in any official report. Outside, the camp settled into evening routine. Voices carried on the wind. Somewhere a radio played music. Life continued as it always did. But Elijah gripped the edge of the cot and made a silent promise. They had broken her body, but he would not let them erase what she had done. He would remember, even if no one else did. 3 days passed. The heat did not break. Hannah grew stronger. She could sit up for short periods. She could drink water without help. But the pain in her legs remained constant. Elijah rationed the morphine carefully. They had very little left. On the 4th morning, dust clouds appeared on the camp's main road. Vehicles approached. Izzy spotted them first. "Convoy coming in," he called to Elijah. Elijah stepped outside the tent. He shielded his eyes against the sun. 3 trucks rolled through the gates. They were painted white with red crosses on the sides. Red Cross Inspection Team. The vehicles stopped, near the command tent. Officers climbed out. They carried clipboards and leather cases. Captain Hargrove met them with forced smiles and handshakes. Elijah watched carefully. Red Cross visits meant documentation, questions. Sometimes they meant change. He made a decision quickly. He ducked back into the tent. Aiko was there during her allowed daytime hours. She sat beside Hannah and helped her drink from a tin cup. "Aiko," Elijah said, "I need you to do something." She looked up at him. Her expression was cautious. "Red Cross is here. They document prisoner treatment. They take statements." Aiko's eyes widened slightly. She understood. "You need to tell them about Hannah, about what happened to her, about the pilot." Aiko glanced at Hannah. The 2 women exchanged a long look. Hannah nodded once. Her face was pale but determined. "They listen?" Aiko asked. "I don't know," Elijah admitted, "but it's worth trying." He spent the next hour making arrangements. He spoke to one of the Red Cross officers, a woman named Miss Patterson. She wore a crisp uniform and carried a notebook. Her face was serious but kind. "There's a prisoner I need you to interview," Elijah said. "She has information about war crimes committed against her." Miss Patterson's eyebrows rose. "What kind of war crimes?" "Torture, by Japanese military police, because she helped an American." "That's a serious allegation, Sergeant." "I know, ma'am, but it's true. I've seen the injuries myself. They're documented." Miss Patterson studied him for a moment. Then she nodded. "I'll speak with her. Where is she?" "In our medical section. She has a translator." "Take me there." They walked across the camp together. Soldiers stared. It was unusual to see a Red Cross officer heading toward the segregated black medical area. Captain Hargrove noticed. His face darkened. Elijah led Miss Patterson into the tent. Hannah was awake. Aiko sat beside her. Both women looked nervous. "This is Hannah," Elijah said, "and her translator, Aiko." Miss Patterson approached slowly. She pulled up a stool and sat down at eye level with Hannah. Her movements were gentle, professional. "Hello," she said. "My name is Sarah Patterson. I'm with the International Red Cross. I'm here to listen." Aiko translated quietly. Hannah's eyes filled with something that might have been hope. Outside, guards whispered to each other. Their voices carried through the canvas walls. Miss Patterson opened her notebook and uncapped her pen. The administration hut was small and stuffy. One window let in afternoon light. Miss Patterson sat at a borrowed desk. Aiko stood beside her. Hannah had been moved to a chair. Her bandaged legs rested on a wooden crate. Captain Hargrove had objected. He had tried to prevent the interview, but Miss Patterson had authority that superseded his. The Red Cross had clearance from higher command. Hargrove had to allow it. Now he stood outside the hut. Elijah could see him through the window. The AO captain paced back and forth. His jaw was tight. Inside, Aiko translated Hannah's words slowly. Her English was limited. Sometimes she struggled for the right terms, but the story came through clearly enough. 6 months ago, Aiko said, repeating Hannah's Japanese. "American plane crash near village. Pilot hurt, bleeding. Hannah find him in field." Miss Patterson wrote quickly. Her pen scratched across the paper. "What did she do?" Aiko spoke to Hannah. Hannah answered. Her voice was soft but steady. "She hide him, in shed behind house. Give him water, food, clean wounds." "For how long?" 5 days. Then American soldiers come, take him away, he live." Miss Patterson looked up. "Did the Japanese military discover this?" Hannah's expression changed. The steadiness cracked. Aiko reached out and touched her hand. "Yes," Aiko said. "Neighbor tell Kempetai, secret police. They come one night. Take Hannah." "What happened then?" Aiko's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "They break her, ask questions. Where pilot go? Who help her? She not tell. They break more." Miss Patterson's pen slowed. She stared at Hannah's bandaged legs. "How long did this continue?" "Weeks. Many weeks." The room fell silent except for the scratch of the pen. Miss Patterson documented everything methodically. She asked specific questions. Dates, locations, names of officers if Hannah remembered them. Hannah answered as best she could. Sometimes she had to stop and breathe through pain. The memories hurt as much as the injuries. Finally, Miss Patterson set down her pen. She looked directly at Hannah. Her eyes were serious. "What you did was very brave," she said. Aiko translated. "You showed mercy to an enemy. You paid a terrible price for it." Hannah lowered her head. She did not seem to think of herself as brave, just someone who had made a choice. "I will submit this report," Miss Patterson continued. "I will make sure it reaches the proper authorities. What was done to you was wrong. It violated international law." Aiko translated. Hana listened. Her eyes were wet, but she did not cry. "Will it matter?" Aiko asked. Her own voice shook. "Will anyone care?" Miss Patterson hesitated. Elijah saw the truth on her face. She wanted to promise something. She wanted to say justice would come. But she was too honest for empty reassurances. "I don't know," she said quietly, "but I will do everything in my power to make sure your story is heard." She gathered her papers and stood. She touched Hana's shoulder gently. Then she left the hut. Through the window, Elijah watched her walk toward Captain Hargrove. The two began to talk. Hargrove's face was red. He gestured sharply. Miss Patterson remained calm, professional. But Elijah could see the captain's eyes. They were cold and calculating. Something bad was coming. Evening settled over the camp. Soldiers lined up for dinner rations. The mess tent was loud with conversation and the clatter of metal plates. Elijah stood in line with his unit, but his attention was elsewhere. He watched the administration building. Lights were on inside. Shadows moved behind the windows. Captain Hargrove was in there. So were other officers. The Red Cross team had left an hour ago. Izzy nudged him. "You gonna eat or just stare?" Elijah took his plate. Beans and some kind of meat that might have been Spam. A piece of bread. He sat at the segregated table reserved for black soldiers. The food tasted like nothing. After dinner, he returned to the medical tent. Hana was sleeping. Aiko had been sent back to the POW section for the night. The tent was quiet, except for Hana's breathing. Elijah sat on his usual stool. He was exhausted, but sleep would not come. His mind kept turning over the interview. Miss Patterson had seemed genuine. She had documented everything carefully. But would it matter? Footsteps approached outside. Multiple people. Elijah stood quickly. The tent flap opened. A private entered. Young kid with nervous eyes. He held an envelope. "Delivery for you, Sergeant." Elijah took it. The envelope was official military correspondence. His name was typed on the front. The private left without another word. Elijah opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Transfer orders. For Hana, she was being moved to a central POW processing facility. Transport would arrive in 48 hours. The orders were signed by Captain Hargrove. Elijah read it 3 times. Each time his hands gripped the paper tighter. 48 hours. And she would be moved. In her condition, the transport would kill her. The journey was long. The trucks were not equipped for medical cases. She would not survive. He knew exactly what this was. Hargrove was getting rid of the evidence. If Hana died in transport, that was unfortunate but unavoidable. The Red Cross report would become meaningless. Just another wartime tragedy. Elijah stood and paced the tent. His mind raced. He could protest the orders. But that would go nowhere. Hargrove had authority over prisoner movements. He could refuse to send her. But that would mean court-martial, imprisonment, the end of everything. He stopped pacing and looked at Hana. She slept peacefully, unaware of what was coming. The cloth scrap with the pilot's image sat folded on the supply crate. Elijah picked it up. The stitching was rough, done with whatever thread Hana had been able to find. But the care was obvious. Every stitch placed with intention. She had saved a man's life. She had endured torture rather than betray him, and now she would be killed by bureaucratic convenience. Elijah felt rage building in his chest, pure and hot, But rage alone would not save her. He needed to think. He needed a plan. He sat back down and forced himself to breathe slowly. Think like a soldier. Find the weakness in the system. Exploit it. Transfer orders required documentation, medical clearance, signatures from multiple departments the military ran, on paperwork. Everything had to be properly stamped and filed. What if the paperwork said she could not be transported? What if her medical condition was documented as too critical? It would be falsification, a court-martial offense. But she would live. Elijah stared at the transfer orders. His hands were steady now. He had made his decision. He walked to the supply crate and pulled out a medical assessment form. Standard military issue. He had signed hundreds of them. He began to write. Late night had settled over the camp. Most soldiers were asleep. Only guards and a few officers remained awake. Elijah sat at the small field desk in the medical tent. A single lantern provided light. The medical assessment form lay in front of him. His handwriting covered the page. Technical language, clinical observations, all of it accurate, all of it damning. He described Hannah's condition in detail: multiple compound fractures, severe infection risk, malnutrition, trauma-induced shock, transportation contraindicated. Patient will not survive journey in current state. At the bottom, he signed his name, Sergeant Elijah Carter, certified medical technician. It was not quite a lie. Everything he had written was true. Hannah was in terrible condition. Transportation really might kill her, but the timing made it suspicious. The report came immediately after the transfer orders. Hargrove would know exactly what Elijah was doing. Izzy had watched him write it. Now he stood near the tent entrance. His expression was troubled. "They're going to crucify you for this," Izzy said quietly. "Probably." "Is she worth it?" Elijah looked at Hannah. She had woken briefly an hour ago. She had asked about the pilot again, her one repeated question. Was he alive? Did he make it home? Elijah did not know. He might never know. The pilot could have been killed in another mission. He could be on the other side of the world. He might not even remember the Japanese woman who saved him. But Hannah remembered. She carried that act of mercy in her broken body. It was all she had left. "Yeah," Elijah said. "She's worth it." Footsteps outside made them both tense, but it was just the guard patrol passing by. Their voices faded into the distance. Elijah folded the medical report carefully. He placed it in an envelope. Tomorrow morning, he would submit it to the transport coordinator. It would go into the official record, and then everything would depend on how the system processed it. He stood and walked to Hannah's cot. She was awake. Her eyes followed him in the lamplight. "Pilot alive?" she whispered, her usual question. Elijah pulled the stool close. He sat down and met her gaze. "I don't know, but I hope so." Hannah's expression changed. Something that might have been a smile. Sad and distant. "I did one good thing," she said. Her English was improving. The words came clearer now. "You did," Elijah confirmed. "Maybe only one. But one." He understood what she meant. In a war full of death and cruelty, she had chosen differently. Once, it had cost her everything, but she had done it anyway. "That one thing matters," Elijah said. He was surprised by the roughness in his own voice. "It matters more than you know." Hannah closed her eyes. A single tear ran down her cheek. She did not wipe it away. Elijah sat with her in silence. Outside, the camp was quiet. Stars filled the sky above the canvas tent. Somewhere far away, the war continued. But in this small space, for this brief moment, there was only two people acknowledging each other's humanity. Finally, Hannah spoke again. "They take me?" She had heard something, or sensed it, Elijah did not insult her by pretending confusion. "They want to," he said, "but I'm going to stop them." "How?" "However I can." Hannah opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him, seeing him clearly. "You risk much, like I did." "Maybe we're both stupid," Elijah said. The corner of Hannah's mouth moved, almost a smile. "Maybe." She reached out with her less damaged hand. Elijah hesitated. Then he took it carefully. Her fingers were cold and thin. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded. Words felt inadequate. They sat like that until she fell asleep again. When her breathing deepened, Elijah gently released her hand. He returned to the field desk and stared at the envelope containing his report. Tomorrow would bring consequences, but tonight he had done what he could. Dawn came with heavy clouds. Rain threatened, but did not fall. Elijah stood outside the medical tent and watched the camp wake up. His uniform felt heavy. He had not slept at all. The envelope with the medical report was in his hand. He had to submit it this morning. The transport coordinator's office opened at 0700 hours. He had 15 minutes. Izzy emerged from the tent. He looked at Elijah's face and said nothing. They had already discussed everything. There was nothing left to say. Elijah walked across the compound. His boots struck the hard-packed dirt. Soldiers moved past him on morning duties. None of them knew what he was about to do. None of them would care. The transport coordinator's office was a small building near the motor pool. Elijah entered. A corporal sat behind a desk covered with papers and file folders. The man looked tired and bored. "Help you, Sergeant?" Elijah placed the envelope on the desk. "Medical assessment. For prisoner transport scheduled in 48 hours. Japanese female prisoner designated for transfer." The corporal opened the envelope and scanned the report. His eyebrows rose slightly. "Says here she's non-transportable." "That's correct." Captain Hargrove signed the transfer orders himself. "I understand, but the patient will not survive transport. It's my professional assessment as her treating medic." The corporal looked at Elijah. Some kind of calculation happened behind his eyes. Then he shrugged. He pulled out a rubber stamp and pressed it onto the bottom of the report. Official received mark. "Goes into the file," he said. "Transport decision will be reviewed by medical command." "How long does that take?" "Could be days, could be a week." Elijah nodded. He had bought time, not much, but something. He left the office and returned to the medical tent. Hannah was awake. She had managed to sit up on her own. Aiko had arrived for the day. The two women were talking quietly in Japanese. When Elijah entered, they both looked at him. The question was clear on their faces. "It's done," he said. "The report is filed." Aiko translated for Hannah. Relief washed over both women's expressions, but Elijah knew better than to feel relieved. This was just the first move. Hargrove would make the next one. Hours passed. Elijah treated other patients, a soldier with an infected foot, another with heat exhaustion. The routine work helped steady his nerves. In the afternoon, Hannah asked to speak with him. Aiko translated. "She wants to know about the pilot," Aiko said. "She wants to know his name, if you know it." Elijah shook his head. "I don't. There were a lot of pilots shot down in this area. A lot of men lost." Hannah spoke again. Aiko listened, and then translated. "She says she hopes he is alive. She hopes he has family. She hopes they know he came home because someone cared." Elijah sat down on the stool. He looked at Hannah directly. "Why did you do it? You knew what would happen if they caught you." Aiko translated the question. Hannah thought for a long moment before answering. "She says," Aiko began slowly, "that when she found him, he was crying. Not from pain, from fear. He thought he would die alone, far from home. She could not leave him like that, The words hit Elijah harder than he expected. He thought about every wounded soldier he had treated. The ones who cried, the ones who called for their mothers, the ones who just wanted someone to hold their hand. She says he looked at her with eyes that said thank you, Aiko continued. Human eyes, not enemy eyes, just human. Hana spoke again. Her voice was stronger now, clearer. She says she did one good thing in this war. Maybe it was stupid, maybe it destroyed her, but she did it, and she would do it again. Elijah felt his throat tighten. He nodded slowly. Tell her, he said, that what she did was not stupid. Tell her it was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Aiko translated. Hana's eyes filled with tears. She lowered her head. Outside, thunder rumbled. The clouds finally opened. Rain began to fall. The rain continued through the afternoon. Elijah and Izzy sat in the supply shed behind the medical tent. Water drummed on the metal roof. They spoke in low voices, even though no one else was nearby. We need to make it official, Elijah said. The medical report. But it has to look like it went through proper channels. Izzy nodded. He understood where this was going. You mean forge the approval? Signature. Not forge, just expedite the process. That's what forging means, Eli. Elijah did not argue. Izzy was right, but right and wrong had become complicated. Letting Hana die was wrong. Saving her required breaking rules. He had made his choice. The transport office uses a specific stamp, Izzy said. He had been thinking about this, too. Medical command approval, red ink. I've seen it before. Can we get one? Maybe. But using it without authorization is a federal offense. They sat in silence. Rain dripped through a crack in the roof. A small puddle formed on the dirt floor. Finally, Izzy spoke. There's a supply sergeant, guy named Williams. He handles administrative equipment. Stamps, typewriters, official seals. You know him? I fixed his hand last month. Cut it pretty bad on some barbed wire. We talked while I stitched him up. Think he'd help? Izzy shook his head. Not help. But maybe look the other way for 5 minutes. It was not much, but it might be enough. They waited until evening. The rain had stopped. The camp was busy with dinner preparations. Soldiers moved between tents. Guards changed shifts. In the confusion of routine, 2 medics could move around without drawing attention. Elijah and Izzy found Williams in the administrative supply building. He was a heavy-set man with graying hair. He looked up when they entered. Evening, Corporal Brooks, Williams said. He remembered Izzy. That hand healing all right? Good as new, thanks to you keeping it clean like I said. Williams smiled. What can I do for you boys? Need to type up some medical paperwork, Izzy said. The lie came smoothly. Our typewriter's broken. Thought maybe we could borrow one for a few minutes. Williams gestured to a desk in the corner. Help yourself. I gotta run over to the mess hall. Be back in 10 minutes. He left. The door closed behind him. Elijah and Izzy exchanged a look. 10 minutes. They moved quickly. The stamps were kept in a locked cabinet. But the lock was simple. Izzy had learned how to pick basic locks during his training. He used a piece of wire from his pocket. The lock clicked open in seconds. Inside were rows of rubber stamps. Different colors. Different purposes. Elijah found the one they needed. Medical command approval. Red ink pad beside it. He pulled out the medical report he had filed earlier. He had made a copy before submitting it. Now he stamped the copy with the approval mark. The red ink looked official. Authentic. We need a signature too, Izzy said. There was a stack of approved medical documents on another desk. Elijah studied the signatures. He chose one that looked relatively simple. He practiced it twice on scrap paper. Then he signed the forged approval line. It was not perfect, but it might pass a casual inspection. They returned the stamps to the cabinet, locked it again, straightened everything to look undisturbed. Williams returned exactly 9 minutes after, leaving. He glanced at the typewriter. "Get what you needed?" "Yes, sir. Thank you." "Anytime." They left the building. Outside, the evening air was cool after the rain. Puddles reflected the darkening sky. Elijah held the forged document inside his jacket. "Now what?" Izzy asked. "Now we file it, make it part of the official record. And hope nobody looks too close." "Yeah, hope." They walked back to the medical tent in silence. Both of them knew what they had just done, the risk they had taken. If they were caught, it would mean prison, dishonorable discharge, the end of everything. But inside the tent, Hannah slept peacefully. Her breathing was steady. Her color was better than it had been. Elijah looked at her and thought about the pilot she had saved. That pilot had broken rules, too. He had accepted help from the enemy. He had trusted a Japanese woman with his life. Maybe sometimes the right thing required breaking rules. Maybe that was what moral courage actually meant. Morning came clear and bright. The rain had washed the camp clean. Everything looked sharper, more defined. Elijah carried the forged approval document to the transport coordinator's office. His heart pounded as he walked, but his face remained calm. He had learned to hide his emotions. It was a survival skill in this army. The same corporal was at the desk. He looked up when Elijah entered. "Back again, Sergeant?" "Medical command approval came through," Elijah said. He placed the document on the desk. "For the Japanese prisoner, Hana. She's officially designated non-transportable." The corporal picked up the document. He scanned it quickly. His eyes moved over the red stamp. The signature. The official letterhead that Elijah had carefully typed. Elijah waited. Every second felt like an hour. If the corporal questioned anything, if he checked with medical command, if he called Captain Hargrove. The corporal shrugged. He pulled out a file folder and placed the document inside. "All right, I'll update the transport roster. She stays here until further notice." "Thank you." Elijah forced himself to walk slowly out of the office. Not too fast. Not like someone running from a crime, just a medic completing routine paperwork. Once outside, he allowed himself one deep breath. It was done. The forgery was now part of the official record. Hana's transport had been canceled through proper channels. He returned to the medical tent. Izzy was there. So was Aiko. Both of them looked at him with questioning eyes. "It's done," Elijah said quietly. "She's not being transported." Aiko translated for Hana. The Japanese woman closed her eyes. Relief crossed her face like a physical wave. But Elijah knew this was not over. Hargrove would see the cancellation. He would investigate. He would want to know who approved it. The forged signature might hold for a day, maybe 2. But eventually, someone would question it. They had bought time. Nothing more. The day passed, slowly. Elijah went through his normal duties. He tried to act like everything was routine. But tension sat in his stomach like a stone. In the afternoon, a private appeared at the medical tent. "Captain Hargrove wants to see you, Sergeant. In his office. Now." Izzy's eyes widened. Elijah nodded. He had been expecting this. He followed the private across the camp. Soldiers watched him pass. Some of them knew something was happening. Gossip traveled fast in a military camp. Hargrove's office was in the command building. The private knocked and opened the door. Elijah entered and stood at attention. Hargrove sat behind his desk. The transport cancellation notice lay in front of him. His face was red with barely controlled anger. "Explain this, Sergeant." "Medical command deemed the prisoner non-transportable, sir. The approval came through this morning. Medical command. Hargrove picked up the document. I don't recall requesting a medical review. Standard protocol, sir. All critical medical cases are reviewed before transport. And this signature? Hargrove pointed at the forged approval line. Whose is this? Major Kendall, sir. Medical command officer. Hargrove stared at him. The silence stretched out. Elijah kept his expression neutral. Inside, his heart hammered. Finally, Hargrove set down the document. Major Kendall is currently stationed in Manila. He has not been on this island in 3 weeks. The words hung in the air. Elijah felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. But he did not let it show on his face. I was not aware of that, sir. I filed the report. The approval came through proper channels. Did it? Hargrove's voice was dangerous, quiet. Or did you fabricate this approval yourself? I would never falsify official documents, sir. Hargrove stood. He walked around the desk. He stopped inches from Elijah's face. You're lying, Sergeant. I know you're lying, and I'm going to prove it. Sir, Dismissed, for now, but this is not over. Elijah saluted and left the office. His hands were shaking. He clenched them into fists. Hargrove knew. He did not have proof yet. But he knew. The end was coming. Night fell over the camp. Elijah sat in the medical tent. Hannah slept. Aiko had been sent back to the POW section hours ago. Only Izzy remained. He knows, Izzy said quietly. Yeah. He's going to push this until he breaks you. Elijah nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. Hargrove would investigate. He would call Manila. He would confirm that Major Kendall never signed the approval. Then he would come for Elijah with formal charges. Court-martial, prison, dishonorable discharge. Was it worth it? Izzy asked. Not accusing, just asking. Elijah looked at Hannah. She slept peacefully. Her breathing was stronger than it had been a week ago. The color had returned to her face. She would live. Yeah, Elijah said. It was worth it. Footsteps approached outside. Multiple people. Heavy boots, striking the ground in unison. The tent flap opened violently. Captain Hargrove entered. Behind him were 2 military police officers. Their faces were hard and professional. Sergeant Elijah Carter, Hargrove said. His voice carried official weight. You are hereby placed under arrest for falsification of military documents, forgery, and conduct unbecoming. The MPs moved forward. One of them pulled handcuffs from his belt. Hannah woke. Her eyes went wide. She tried to sit up. She spoke rapidly in Japanese. Panicked words that needed no translation. Wait, Izzy said. He stepped forward. Captain, this is... Stand aside, Corporal, unless you want to join him. Izzy hesitated. Then he stepped back. His face was anguished. The MPs cuffed Elijah's hands behind his back. The metal was cold against his wrists. He did not resist. There was no point. Hargrove looked satisfied, triumphant. You'll be held pending formal charges. Court-martial proceedings will begin within 72 hours. Hannah was crying now. She reached out toward Elijah, her broken fingers trembling. Elijah met her eyes. He tried to convey something. That it was okay. That he had made his choice. That she was worth it. The MPs turned him toward the exit. They began to walk him out of the tent. But then another voice spoke from outside. Calm. Authoritative. Captain Hargrove, what is the meaning of this? Everyone froze. A man entered the tent. He wore a major's insignia. His uniform was crisp despite the heat. His face was weathered but intelligent. Hargrove's expression changed. Uncertainty flickered there. Major Kendall, Hargrove said. I was not aware you had returned to the island, sir. Major Kendall. The real one. The officer whose signature Elijah had forged. This was the end. Elijah felt everything collapse inside him. But Major Kendall was looking at Hannah. His eyes moved over her bandaged legs. The crude medical setup. The obvious signs of torture and careful treatment. "Release the sergeant," Kendall said quietly. "Now." The MPs removed the handcuffs from Elijah's wrists. The metal scraped against his skin. He rubbed his wrists and stared at Major Kendall. The officer's presence made no sense. He was supposed to be in Manila. Captain Hargrove's face had gone pale. He straightened his shoulders. "Sir, this man forged your signature on official documents. He falsified medical approval to prevent prisoner transport." "Did he?" Kendall's voice was flat. He walked closer to Hannah's cot. She shrank back slightly. Fear showed in her eyes. Kendall knelt beside the cot. His movements were slow, careful. He examined her bandaged legs without touching them. Then he looked at Elijah. "What happened to her?" Elijah's throat was dry. "Torture, sir, by Japanese military police. She sheltered an American pilot. They broke her legs, her hands, other injuries." "When?" "6 months ago, sir. The torture continued for weeks." Kendall stood. He looked at Captain Hargrove. "You were going to transport this woman?" "She's a prisoner, sir. Transfer orders were standard procedure." "Standard procedure?" Kendall's voice grew harder. "In her condition, transport would have killed her." Hargrove said nothing. Kendall turned to the MPs. "Leave us, all of you except the sergeant." The MPs left immediately. Hargrove hesitated, but he could not refuse a direct order from a superior officer. He walked out of the tent. His jaw was clenched tight. When they were alone, Kendall sat on the stool Elijah usually used. He looked tired, older than his years. "I arrived on the island 2 hours ago," Kendall said. "Red Cross filed a report about this case, about this woman. They sent it directly to Medical Command. I came to investigate personally." Elijah felt something shift in his chest. Miss Patterson had kept her promise. "Did you forge my signature?" Kendall asked. The question was direct. No judgment in his tone. Elijah met his eyes. "Yes, sir." "Why?" "Because she would have died otherwise, and she didn't deserve that." Kendall nodded slowly. He looked at Hannah again. She watched them both with frightened eyes. Izzy translated quietly from the corner. He had stayed through everything. "The Red Cross report was detailed," Kendall said. "It documented her injuries, her testimony about the pilot, her treatment by Japanese military police. It also documented her treatment here." He pulled a folder from inside his jacket. He opened it and showed Elijah. The pages were filled with Miss Patterson's neat handwriting, photographs of Hannah's injuries, witness statements. "This woman committed an act of extraordinary mercy," Kendall said. "She saved an American life at tremendous personal cost. That makes her more than a prisoner. It makes her someone we owe a debt to." "Yes, sir." "Captain Hargrove wanted her gone. Dead, most likely, because her existence was inconvenient, because it complicated his neat categories of enemy and ally." Kendall closed the folder. He stood and walked to the tent entrance. He stared out at the dark camp. "I could court-martial you, Sergeant. The forgery is clear. The evidence is documented. You broke military law." Elijah said nothing. He had known the risk. Kendall turned back to face him. "But I won't. Because you did what I would hope any of my men would do. You saw an injustice and you stopped it, even when it cost you everything." Relief flooded through Elijah. His knees felt weak. "The transport is canceled," Kendall continued. "Officially, with my actual signature this time. The prisoner remains here under medical care until she is fully stabilized. When she is transferred, it will be to proper medical facilities, not a cattle truck." "Thank you, sir." Kendall walked to the exit. He paused and looked back. Captain Hargrove will not be happy. He wanted your head. Watch yourself, Sergeant. I will, sir. Kendall left. The night air rushed in where he had stood. Elijah sat down heavily on the stool. His hands were shaking. Izzy let out a long breath. That was close, Izzy said. Too close. Hannah spoke. Izzy translated. She wants to know what happened. If you're safe? Elijah looked at her. He managed a tired smile. I'm safe. You're safe. We're all safe. For now. 5 days passed. The camp settled back into routine. Elijah continued his medical duties. Hannah grew stronger each day. She could sit up for longer periods. She could eat solid food without help. The black medics worked together to build her a wheelchair. They used spare parts from damaged equipment, old wheels from a broken cart, metal tubing from supply crates. The result was crude but functional. On the 6th day, they helped Hannah into it. She gripped the armrests with her damaged hands. Izzy pushed her slowly around the inside of the tent. She looked down at the wheels. Something changed in her expression. I can move, she said in English. Her words were clearer now. She had been practicing. That's right, Elijah said. Not far, not fast, but you can move. Tears ran down her face, but she was smiling. That afternoon, the camp radio crackled with news. Japan had formally surrendered. The war was over. Soldiers erupted in cheers. They ran between the tents, shouting. Some of them fired rifles into the air in celebration. Elijah stood outside the medical tent and listened to the chaos. The war was over. He should feel something. Joy. Relief. But he felt mostly numb. Izzy appeared beside him. It's done. We're going home. Yeah. You don't sound happy? Elijah shrugged. What happens to them? He gestured toward the POW section. What happens to Hannah and Aiko and all the others? They go home too, eventually. That's what happens when wars end. But Elijah knew it was not that simple. Nothing about this war had been simple. Inside the tent, Hannah and Aiko spoke quietly in Japanese. They had heard the news too. Their voices were subdued. Not celebratory. Days turned into a week. Orders began arriving. Demobilization plans. Transport schedules. Men would be sent home in stages. The black units would go last. They always went last. Elijah spent his time caring for Hannah, teaching her to use the wheelchair, helping her build strength in her arms. She worked hard, determined. One afternoon, a white soldier entered the medical tent. He had a cut on his arm. Deep but not serious. He looked at Elijah with suspicious eyes. You the medic? I am. The soldier hesitated. Then he shook his head. I'll wait for someone else. I'm the only one here. Then I'll come back later. The soldier turned to leave. But then he saw Aiko. She was helping organize medical supplies in the corner. She looked up when she felt his stare. The soldier walked over to her. You speak English? Little bit, Aiko said carefully. Can you wrap this? He held out his bleeding arm. Aiko glanced at Elijah. He nodded. She took clean bandages and began wrapping the soldier's wound. Her hands were gentle, efficient. The soldier watched her work. He did not thank Elijah. He did not acknowledge that a black medic had supplies and expertise, but he accepted help from a Japanese prisoner. The irony was not lost on Elijah. He said nothing. He just watched. When Aiko finished, the soldier left without a word. She returned the unused bandages to their shelf. Her face showed no emotion. Does that bother you? Elijah asked. Aiko thought for a moment. War makes people confused about who is enemy, who is friend, who is human. Yeah, Elijah said. It does. That night, Hannah asked to speak with him. Aiko translated. She wants to thank you. For everything. For saving her life. For fighting when you did not have to. Elijah shook his head. She's the one who fought. I just did what any medic should do, Aiko translated. Hana smiled sadly. She spoke again. She says you are wrong. Many medics would not fight for Japanese prisoner. You chose to see person, not enemy. Elijah had no answer to that. The camp began to empty. Soldiers shipped out in groups, white units first, then support personnel. The black medical unit received orders to remain until final processing was complete. Elijah watched men leave. Some of them had been cruel, some had been indifferent, a few had been decent. All of them went home to their lives, their futures. The POW section also began to thin. Japanese women were processed for repatriation. They would return to a destroyed homeland, to cities reduced to rubble, to families that might no longer exist. One morning, Elijah stood near the camp bulletin board. New orders were posted there each day. He scanned the papers. His eyes caught on one announcement: all remaining prisoners to be transferred to Central Repatriation Facility. Date: 14 days from now. Transport, medical truck convoy, accommodations, appropriate to medical needs. He read it twice. Hana would be leaving, going home, or whatever home still existed for her. He should feel relieved. She was strong enough now. The transport would be properly equipped. She would survive the journey. But instead he felt a strange hollowness in his chest. Later that day, more orders appeared. Black medical units to be redeployed stateside. Processing to begin in 10 days. Return transport. Troop ship departing in 3 weeks. Elijah did the math. He would leave before Hana did. They would not have a chance to say goodbye properly. The military did not care about such things. He returned to the medical tent. Hana was outside in her wheelchair. She sat in the shade and watched the camp activity. Aiko stood beside her. When Hana saw Elijah, she smiled. It still surprised him. That smile. After everything she had endured, she could still find reasons to smile. You leave soon, she said in English. No question. Statement of fact. How did you know? Soldiers talk, we listen. Elijah sat on a supply crate. The afternoon heat pressed down on them. Somewhere a radio played music, American swing, too cheerful for the moment. You're leaving too, Elijah said. 2 weeks, medical transport to the repatriation center. Hana nodded. She had known that as well. They sat in silence for a while. Around them, the camp continued its slow dissolution. Men packed equipment, trucks were loaded, the machinery of war reversed itself. What will you do? Elijah asked. When you go home? Aiko translated. Hana answered slowly. She says home is gone, village destroyed, family may be dead. She does not know what waits. I'm sorry. Hana shook her head. She spoke again. Aiko translated. She says everyone loses in war. Japanese, American, everyone. The pilot she saved, he lost too. Even if he lived. War takes from everyone. Elijah thought about that. About the men he had treated. The ones who survived but would never be whole. The ones who went home with invisible wounds. The pilot, Elijah said. I wish I knew what happened to him. I wish I could tell you. Hana smiled sadly. She spoke in her careful English. Not important to know. Important that I did right thing. One time. That enough. A white officer walked past. He glanced at them. A black soldier sitting with Japanese prisoners. His face showed disapproval, but he said nothing and kept walking. Elijah watched him go. Then he turned back to Hana. You did more than one right thing, he said. You kept your humanity in hell. That's the hardest thing anyone can do. Aiko translated. Hana's eyes filled with tears. She reached out with her damaged hand. Elijah took it gently. They sat together in the fading afternoon. Two people from opposite sides of a war, connected by a single thread of shared understanding. That mercy mattered. That humanity mattered, even when everything else fell apart. 1 week remained before Elijah's deployment home. The camp felt emptier each day. Tents were struck. Equipment was crated. The temporary settlement began to disappear. Elijah spent his final days organizing medical records. Everything had to be documented, filed, transferred to the next unit. The military demanded perfect paperwork even at the end. He sat at the field desk in the medical tent. Stacks of files surrounded him. He worked through them methodically, each patient, each treatment, each outcome. Hannah's file was thick. Elijah had documented everything, her injuries, her recovery, the torture she had endured, the pilot she had saved. He wanted it on record, official, so someone would know what happened here. At the bottom of her file, he placed the Red Cross report. Miss Patterson's careful documentation. It was the closest thing to justice Hannah would ever receive. He closed the file and added it to the stack for transfer. His hand rested on it for a moment. Then he moved to the next one. Izzy entered the tent. He carried his duffel bag, already packed. Transport roster. Just got posted, Izzy said. We ship out in 5 days. Day before we thought. Elijah looked up. 5 days? Yeah, they're moving faster than planned, getting everyone home for the holidays. Elijah set down his pen. 5 days. That changed everything. He had assumed he would have more time. A proper goodbye. What about the POW transport? He asked. Still scheduled for next week. Won't change. So he would leave. And Hannah would remain. They would not see each other again. Elijah stood and walked outside. The sun was setting. Orange light spread across the camp. Shadows grew long. He breathed the evening air and tried to process what he felt. Loss. That was the word. He felt loss, which made no sense. Hannah was not his to lose. She was a patient, a prisoner, someone he had helped. Nothing more. But it felt different than that. She had changed something in him, made him see clearly, made him choose courage over compliance. Aiko found him standing there. Hannah wants to speak with you. He followed her inside. Hannah sat in her wheelchair near the cot. She looked at him with knowing eyes. You leave early, she said. Her English was almost fluent now. Yes, 5 days. I am glad. Elijah frowned. Glad. Glad you go home. Glad you leave this place. Glad you have future. She reached into a pocket sewn onto her dress. Aiko had made it for her, a place to keep small things. Hannah pulled out the cloth scrap, the one with the pilot stitched on it. She held it out to Elijah. No, he said. That's yours. Your memory. Memory here. She touched her chest, over her heart. Cloth is for you, so you remember too. I'll remember anyway. Take it, please. Elijah took the cloth carefully. The fabric was soft from handling. The stitches were rough but filled with care. He folded it and put it in his breast pocket. Thank you, he said quietly. Hannah smiled. You saved me. I give you this. Fair trade. Not fair at all. You're giving me way more than I gave you. She shook her head. You give me life. I give you cloth, not same. But Elijah understood what she meant. The cloth represented something bigger. A reminder. A piece of truth to carry forward. They talked for a while longer. About nothing important. About everything important. When night fell completely, Aiko helped Hannah back to the cot. Elijah prepared to leave. Sergeant, Hannah said as he reached the tent flap. He turned back. Live good life. Be good person. That is how you thank me. Elijah nodded. His throat was too tight for words. The final days passed quickly. Too quickly. Elijah finished his paperwork. He packed his belongings. Everything he owned fit into one duffel bag, a whole war reduced to canvas and buckles. On the last morning, he woke before dawn. The camp was quiet. Most men still slept. He dressed slowly in the darkness. Then he walked to the medical tent. Hannah was awake. She sat in her wheelchair near the entrance. Aiko stood beside her. They had been waiting. "You leave today," Hannah said. Not a question. "Yes. Transport at 0800. The three of them stood in silence. Dawn light began to filter through the canvas. Outside, the camp started to wake. Voices, footsteps, the familiar sounds of military mourning. Aiko spoke first. "I want to thank you, for Hannah, for all of us. You did not have to help." "Yes, I did," Elijah said. "I absolutely did." Aiko reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small piece of paper, folded many times. She handed it to Elijah. "My sister address, in Japan. After war, maybe you can write. Tell us you are well." Elijah took the paper. He unfolded it and looked at the careful handwriting. Japanese characters with English translation below. He refolded it and put it in his wallet. "I'll write," he promised. Hannah motioned for him to come closer. He knelt beside her wheelchair. She looked at him with clear eyes. "I cannot walk," she said slowly. "My legs broken, my hands broken, body destroyed." She paused, took a breath. "But I go home standing. You understand?" Elijah understood. She would return with her dignity, her humanity, the things they could not break no matter how hard they tried. "Yes," he said, "I understand. The pilot I saved. Maybe he is dead now. Maybe he forget me. Does not matter. I did right thing. That lives forever." Elijah felt tears burning in his eyes. He blinked them back. "It does live forever," he said. "I promise you that. I'll make sure of it." Hannah reached out. She touched his face with her damaged hand. The gesture was gentle, maternal. "Be brave in your country, too," she said. "You need courage there. Different kind, but still courage." She was right. He was going home to Jim Crow laws, to segregation, to a country that would treat him as less than human despite his service. The war was over, but his fight was not. "I will," he promised. A whistle blew across the camp. Assembly call. Time to form up. Elijah stood. He looked at both women. He wanted to say something profound, something that captured what they meant to him. But words felt inadequate. "Thank you," he finally said, "for everything, for showing me what courage really looks like." Aiko bowed. Hannah smiled through tears. Elijah turned and walked out of the tent. He did not look back. If he looked back, he might not leave. Izzy was waiting outside with both their duffel bags. They walked toward the assembly area together. Behind them, the medical tent grew smaller, disappeared from view. "You okay?" Izzy asked. "No," Elijah said honestly. "But I will be." They joined the formation of black soldiers. Officers called roll. Trucks pulled up. The process of leaving began. Elijah climbed into the truck bed. He sat on a wooden bench. Other soldiers crowded in around him. The engine started. Exhaust filled the air. As the truck began to move, Elijah reached into his breast pocket. He pulled out the cloth scrap. He looked at the stitched pilot one more time. Then he pressed it against his chest and closed his eyes. The trucks rolled through the camp gates. Dust rose in clouds behind them. Soldiers sat in silence. Some stared at the passing landscape. Others kept their eyes closed. Elijah watched the camp disappear. The tents, the buildings, the segregated sections where black and white had lived separate existences, all of it fading into memory. The truck convoy moved slowly along the coastal road. Palm trees swayed in the morning breeze. The ocean stretched blue and endless to the horizon. It looked peaceful, beautiful, no hint of the war that had raged here. They drove for 2 hours. The sun climbed higher. Heat built inside the truck bed. Men removed their helmets. Some dozed despite the bouncing ride. Finally, the convoy reached the port. Ships waited in the harbor. Massive troop transports ready to carry them home. Soldiers cheered at the sight. They were leaving. Really leaving. The truck stopped at the dock. Officers shouted orders. Men grabbed their bags and formed lines. The boarding process would take hours, maybe all day. Elijah stood in line with his unit. Izzy was behind him. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. The line moved forward slowly, step by step, closer to the gangplank, closer to home. Elijah glanced back at the island one final time. Somewhere inland, the camp still operated. Hana was there. Aiko was there. The Japanese POWs waiting for their own transport home. He thought about Hana in her wheelchair, learning to move herself, building strength, preparing to return to a destroyed country with ruined legs and unbreakable spirit. The line moved again. Elijah was almost to the gangplank now. Behind him, more trucks arrived, more soldiers. The whole island was emptying. At the top of the gangplank, a white officer checked names against a roster. Each soldier had to show identification. Prove they belonged. Elijah reached the front. He handed over his papers. The officer barely glanced at them. "Welcome home, Sergeant," the officer said mechanically. Elijah boarded the ship. He found his assigned berth in the segregated section. Lower deck, poor ventilation, cramped bunks. The black soldiers always got the worst accommodations. He stowed his duffel bag and climbed up to the deck. He needed air. Space. One last look at the island. Other black soldiers had the same idea. They lined the rail and stared out at the harbor. Some smiled. Some looked troubled. All of them silent. The ship's horn sounded, deep and mournful. Final preparations before departure. Crew members moved across the deck. Lines were checked, hatches secured. Elijah pulled out the cloth scrap. He held it in his palm. The stitched pilot seemed to stare at him, a reminder of courage, of mercy, of choosing humanity over hate. He thought about the real pilot, whoever he was, wherever he was. Did he remember the Japanese woman who saved him? Did he know what it cost? Her? Or had she become just another forgotten moment in a long war? The ship's engines rumbled to life. The deck vibrated beneath Elijah's feet. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the vessel began to move. Pulling away from the dock, turning toward open water, the island grew smaller. The buildings, the roads, everything shrinking into the distance. Elijah stood at the rail until he could not see land anymore, until there was nothing but ocean in every direction. Then he carefully folded the cloth scrap and returned it to his pocket. He touched it once more. A silent promise. He would not forget. The ship docked in San Francisco. Soldiers flooded down the gangplanks. Some kissed the ground. Others searched the crowd for families. Joy and relief everywhere. Elijah's unit was held back. They waited while white soldiers disembarked first. Standard procedure. Nobody questioned it. When they finally left the ship, no families waited. Black soldiers were processed separately, directed to different areas, reminded of their place. Elijah received his discharge papers. Honorable service, medical citation. None of it mattered. He was just another black man in uniform, invisible again. He took a train south, back to Alabama, back to the segregated town where he had grown up. The landscape rolled past the window. Fields, small towns, everything unchanged by the war. The train stopped at a small station. Elijah stepped onto the platform. Heat hit him immediately, different from Pacific heat. Drier, familiar. He walked into town, carrying his duffel bag, wearing his uniform. People stared but said nothing. Colored-only signs hung on water fountains, on restrooms, on restaurant doors. The same signs that had been there when he left. The same system of control. Elijah stopped at a water fountain. He bent to drink from the designated colored side. The water was warm, metallic. He straightened and wiped his mouth. A white man stood nearby, middle-aged, wearing overalls. He looked at Elijah's uniform, then at his face. "War's over, boy," the man said. "You can take that off now." Boy, not soldier, not sergeant. Boy. Elijah felt anger rising in his chest, hot and familiar. He had fought for this country, saved lives, risked everything, and he was still just a boy to this man. He reached into his pocket. His fingers found the cloth scrap. He did not pull it out, just touched it, felt the rough stitches through the fabric. "Be brave in your country, too." Hannah's words echoed in his mind. You need courage there, different kind, but still courage. Elijah looked at the white man. He kept his face neutral. "Have a good day, sir." He walked away, slow and steady, not running, not apologizing, just walking. The man shouted something behind him. Elijah did not turn around. He kept walking. He found a boarding house that accepted black tenants, a narrow building on the edge of town. The landlady looked at his uniform. "You serve?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Pacific Theater. Medic?" She nodded. Respect showed in her eyes. "Room's $10 a week." "Thank you, ma'am." He climbed the stairs to a small room. Single bed, one window, shared bathroom down the hall. He set his duffel bag on the floor and sat on the bed. The room was quiet. Too quiet after months of camp noise. Generators, shouted orders. Men talking in their sleep. Elijah pulled out the cloth scrap. He unfolded it carefully. The stitched pilot looked back at him, a symbol of everything he had witnessed, everything he had learned. He thought about Hannah. Was she home yet? Had her transport arrived safely? Was she alive? He had no way to know. The war separated people completely. Letters took months, if they arrived at all. But he had Aiko's sister's address. When things settled, when mail service resumed between nations, he would write, he would find out. Outside his window, the town continued its rhythm. People walked past. Cars drove by. Life went on. Elijah lay back on the bed. He held the cloth scrap against his chest. Tomorrow he would start looking for work, building a new life in the old place. Tonight he just remembered. Sunday morning arrived with church bells. Elijah dressed in his civilian clothes. His uniform hung in the small closet. He would not wear it again. It attracted too much attention, too many questions. He walked to the small Baptist church on the edge of the colored section. White paint peeled from the wooden walls. The steps creaked beneath his feet. Inside, people sang hymns. Their voices rose together, strong and defiant. Music that acknowledged suffering but refused to surrender. Elijah sat in the back pew. He did not know the words anymore, or maybe he had forgotten how to sing. The war had taken something from him, left something else in its place. After the service, he walked to the small cemetery behind the church. Old graves and new, names carved into simple stones, people who had lived and died in this place, who had fought their own battles, their own wars. He found a bench beneath an oak tree, sat down, pulled out the cloth scrap. Children played nearby, barefoot in the grass. Their laughter carried on the wind. So different from the children he had seen overseas, orphaned, starving, eyes too old for their faces. These children were poor, they knew hardship, but they played and laughed anyway, finding joy in small things, resilience built into their bones. Elijah watched them and thought about the pilot Hannah had saved, about mercy given at impossible cost, about humanity choosing to survive even when everything argued against it. He looked at the stitched figure, the careful work, the determination to record one good act in a war full of evil. Nobody would write about Hannah in the history books. Her name would not appear in military reports. The pilot probably did not even know her name. She was just a village woman, enemy civilian, forgotten casualty. But Elijah knew. I had witnessed her courage, documented her sacrifice, and he would carry it forward. He folded the cloth carefully. He brought it to his lips and whispered, "They didn't write you down, but I did." The words were a promise, a vow. He would remember when others forgot. He would tell her story when systems tried to erase it. He would be the record that bureaucracy could not destroy. A child ran past him. She stumbled and fell, scraped her knee. Elijah stood automatically, medic instinct. But her mother was already there, picking her up, kissing the hurt, making it better. The mother glanced at Elijah. She smiled. A quick acknowledgement. One black person to another. We survive. We continue. We endure. Elijah sat back down. The sun was warm on his face. Birds sang in the oak tree. The church bells stopped ringing. Silence settled over the cemetery. He thought about Hannah learning to move in her wheelchair, about Aiko helping her, about all the women who had survived that camp, who were going home to destroyed cities and uncertain futures. He thought about Izzy and the other medics, about Captain Hargrove and Major Kendall, about every person who had played a part in that small drama on a Pacific island. The war had ended, but its effects would ripple forward forever, in bodies that would not heal, in minds that carried wounds no one could see, in choices that would echo through generations. Elijah put the cloth scrap back in his pocket, over his heart, where it would stay, a permanent reminder. He stood, brushed off his pants, walked back toward the boarding house. His feet followed familiar paths through the segregated town, past signs that limited where he could eat, drink, exist. But something had changed inside him. Hannah had changed him. She had shown him that one person choosing mercy could matter, that one act of courage could ripple outward in ways impossible to measure. He could not change the system alone, could not tear down Jim Crow with his bare hands, but he could choose to see humanity, to act with courage, to remember the right thing even when the world forgot. The boarding house came into view, small and shabby, but it was home for now. Tomorrow he would find work, build a life, fight his own war in his own country, the battle for dignity, for recognition, for the simple right to be treated as human. It would be hard, maybe harder than anything he had faced overseas, but he would face it. Because Hannah had taught him that broken legs did not mean broken spirit, that torture could destroy the body but not the truth, that even in hell, mercy still mattered. Elijah climbed the steps to his room. He sat at the small desk near the window. He pulled out paper and a pen. He began to write. Not a letter. Not yet. Just words. A record. Hannah's story in his own hand. Outside, the town continued. The segregation continued. The injustice continued. But inside that small room, one man wrote down the truth. One man kept a promise. One man refused to let mercy be forgotten. The sun moved across the sky. Shadows lengthened. Elijah's hand moved steadily across the page, recording, remembering, ensuring that one woman's courage would survive, even if the world never knew her name, even if history tried to erase her. He knew, and he would make sure others knew too. That was enough. That had to be enough.